Testing 1 2, test 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 and 3. Test. Anybody hear me out there? We are testing. Testing the live stream. Test. 1 2 and 3. Give us a few minutes here, and then we will be live. I mean, we are live right now, but yeah, looks like we still got 2 minutes. 2 minutes to go. Yeah, looks like we. Hey there, Thread Killer, and hey there, She-Wolf. Thank you, both of you, for joining us here. I'll be right back. Testing 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. Testing to see if anybody can hear me out there. I know we got looks like we got 3 people here on the call, but I can't hear them. Let's see what we got here. Test 1 2. Hello. Okay.
Welcome. This service is provided by freeconferencecall.com. There is 1 host and 3 participants in this conference.
That's what I mean. You have to mess around with it because there's like so many different ways to call in. Because like calling in one way, it'll say I'm going to get charged. But then if I do it the other way, going through the app, it doesn't try and charge me. But like I said, sometimes when I'm trying to link up, it doesn't want to let me link up. And I'm not sure why it's doing that.
Hey, good peeps.
Like maybe... Oh, hi. Sorry.
That's okay. How's it going? We are live here.
I'm good.
I went a little early with the YouTube live stream to test it out because I could not hear anybody. I could see that there were people on the call, but I was just going to sit there and talk to myself, apparently. But I'm glad we're all here. So who do we got here?
We're here.
I gave Paulette the link to the live chat.
Oh, cool. I do
the
see her in there.
Call.
Okay, I do see Paulette in there.
Hey, Paulette.
Thanks for joining us here. And Thread Killer and She-Wolf and everybody else. We got 6 people there in the chat. So we got, what, 4 or 5 people here? Who else is here on the call?
Hello, Sunshine. So far.
Who?
Let's see here. Just Christy and I so far that I know of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're here.
Okay.
I'm here.
Christy. Taylor's there too?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm here.
Oh, hey, Taylor.
Hello.
Let me turn this
Hi.
on here.
Now, Greg, I have to be completely honest. I tried to do some light reading for the 7 major mistakes, but I couldn't sit there and get through it.
Was it that bad or what? Or
Oh, it wasn't that bad. It was just I just couldn't sit here and just read it. I don't know what was going on. My animals were being ridiculous today, and it was just I was trying to get through it, and I tried to do notes. I did some notes, but I only got to about probably the 3rd mistake, and then I dropped out of it completely.
Well, that's okay. I haven't even looked at it yet. I mean, I've skimmed through it, but I have not really read it. So I'm curious to get some fresh takes on the 7 suicides, right? Is that what it is? I gotta find that link too.
The 7 mistakes
7
in
mistakes.
suicide investigations.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we should definitely first finish up from last week with what we had, and we were on page 296, so I'm going to jump to page 296 of the 488-page BCA document right now. So,
Let me open that up in Dropbox.
and if anybody wants it, you can just Google, just search for David Crowley Research, and it's generally the first one that comes up there. And I have not organized a lot of these documents the way that I should, and so hopefully now I'll have time to actually do something to make it easier. The whole purpose of putting the documents here is just to make it easier for people to find them, but I want to make it even easier somehow. So that's the next one, 296.
There is a link for the notebook that's in the group files. You uploaded that on September 7th.
Oh, okay.
For
All right.
anybody who also wants to either print out the notebook or check it out through there.
That's right. And that was like I was a little disappointed because I was expecting 59 pages front and back, and that's not what I counted there. It's like 20 something. So there's still pages missing. I don't know if those are blank pages. I'm not sure.
Or they could have been ripped out already.
They could have been. They definitely could have been. So let me see. Let's see if I can minimize this. So we ended up on page 296 last time, and let's see if I want to open this up in a different way if I can. Probably download it first.
Find a spot to sit, baby. Sit down. actually printed these out.
Oh, good.
One of these is read.
Yeah, really. Nothing like that.
Okay.
Let's see if this will open up
We
here.
are
Trying to find the best
working on
one.
an analysis of David's handwriting.
Ah, how's that going?
Slow.
That's okay.
It's been a busy week.
Nothing wrong with that. Alright, what is this here? Oops. Okay. Alright, so looking at page 296, GSTR edit. So Gray State, the rise is what I'm guessing here. And let's go down. I just want to see what page. So this would be page 33. Page 33, side B. That's what that little B there is. Anytime you see that. So front and back. All the pages were taken out when the BCA got them. They photographed everything. The only thing I really don't like about is that they actually wrote on these pages here. So the 41A-33, all this bottom hand stuff here, that's what the BCA wrote on the actual note page. And I'm not sure if that's necessary or if that's standard. Apparently a lot of things that we might not think are standard are turning up standard. I do want to also say hi to Pansy, who is also in the chat room too, and to everybody else. We got about 7 people in there right now, so let's see. Let's go through this. So this is for the edit. So they were making other vids, and the thing about this is you can't really tell when it was if somebody is typing in the back, just try to put yourself on mute while you're doing that, just so it doesn't come through here, or else it sounds like there's like a big storm coming my way, and I don't need that right now, especially in California. So we got enough problems already. But thank you for that. I appreciate that. So yeah, some of the stuff like Stalin, right? I can't WW2 war footage. Hitler speech. I'd be curious to see what Hitler speech that would be, since it's all in German, right? With subtitles. But the military-industrial complex speech with Dwight Eisenhower, 1961. Anybody know what speech that might be? Right, the speech about the military-industrial complex, of course. Which is a very powerful speech too. I think the first time I saw it, I watched a movie called Good Night and Good Luck, and I thought it was really, really good. That
was a really good movie.
And that was the first time they played that at the very end of that movie. That was the first time that I had ever heard that. So yeah, it was very, very powerful. And that's just one small little piece of it. If you listen to the whole thing or watch the whole thing, it's out there on YouTube as well. But it's very, very powerful, and yeah, interesting stuff. When you consider that Eisenhower, I guess there's some theories about Eisenhower and the UFOs and stuff like that, but I don't know. Cut and the one that was made after David's death. Has everybody seen that? Any views on that?
Yes. I saw it.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Taylor, have you seen it?
I have not seen it, but yeah, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I think it's worth watching. Yeah, it's definitely worth watching at least. But for Christine and for Sophia, who have seen it, what did you both think about it?
It was a lot to take in.
Yeah,
a lot of
sure.
information.
Lots of time went into that, and definitely a lot of footage
kind of
from 2012.
Too.
Was it depressing?
I mean,
was it the music
me,
or was it just the whole thing?
No, it was for me. It wasn't actually the content that was depressing.
Mm-hmm.
It was just thinking of what would have been or what could have been.
Yeah.
It's just kind of another um, can't really say slap in the face because I didn't know him personally,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just kind of another kind of punch in the gut. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know, the first the documentary or whatever you want to call it that they did. I mean, that was bad enough. The picture that they painted of them, and then that it's just sad. It's just
Yeah.
really sad to wonder, because he and Camille, I mean, both were so absolutely creative. It's kind of that way anyway. I just get kind of emotional.
Yeah, I think knowing everything that happened with David and all the questions, I think that does really put a very like dark, sad cloud over this whole film. And I don't know if that was, the whole purpose to even put it out there. I don't really know, but I do know that film. I've seen a lot of other documentaries, like In Game, some of the other Alex Jones ones, and it kind of fell in that same thing. I just kind of got that same vibe from it, but you know, I don't know, anything that
And
definitely helps.
and it's really interesting that you say, you're not sure, like you know how it's gonna do with it. Like, is it gonna drive it, or is it gonna hurt it, or whatever. But like I was telling Sophia this, I was from talking to like friends and stuff. He's a gamer, and just from talking on the internet and stuff like that,
Really?
he's heard about it. And yeah, so it's really reached a lot of people. A lot of people have heard about it. I mean, especially even the young community. And like I was, and I was talking to them about the rise and everything. And I think that's something. I think that there's going to be such a huge curiosity, but especially with young people, that it's actually going to draw people more to it,
Right.
because it's just reached. So it's unbelievable how many people this has reached. I mean, it's reaching people. I'm not going to give the exact age, but it's reaching people between the 15 and 18 to 19-year-old age
Wow.
range.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
That's good. People that are thinking about, or that are one day going to have that choice. Hey, there is one option. You could join the service, could join the army, but you don't want to get some PTSD and have something like this happen. It's just ridiculous.
Well, and what's funny is he thinks it's just all insane, and I didn't influence him at all. I asked what his thoughts were, and he was like, "There's no way that he did it." He's like, "It doesn't make any sense. It's not logical."
Right.
And so, I mean, I would be curious to see how many other young people have watched the documentary and then have like done a little bit of digging to see what their thoughts are on
Absolutely.
it.
If I could just, I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm actually 19.
Oh,
So
okay.
it just kind of shows you how young some people are that get into these kinds of things. I mean, I've only been in the group since probably about, I don't know, last year. So, I mean, I've only been doing research on it for about a year, but when I have time away from work and things like that, life and whatever, then I kind of get back onto the group and I look at the new things that have come out and everything else. So just like as I said, I am 19, so it does kind of show you that it does reach my age
Crosses
group.
a lot of, yeah, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
really good.
Are
To
there
know that some of you are thinking for yourselves.
Yeah.
Are there other people, Taylor, that are also that you find when you talk to them about this? Do other people your age also understand that there's something weird going on here, or have questions?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, last conference call, oh my God, I think it was 5, 6 months ago. Oh my gosh, it was so long ago. But I actually had my two best friends come onto the call with me,
That's right.
because I had gotten them to watch the documentary with me because I was still kind of going over everything that Sloppymentary decided to show everybody. And I was more looking into what the documentary was saying and everything. So I was still kind of doing my research on the case. And they had came over. So I kind of introduced them to it, and they came into the call, and they're actually still in the group, I believe. Um, so yeah, I've kind of, shown everybody that I've talked to about it, kind of like my views on the actual case itself and like what's happened. And we sit down, and everybody that I've talked to so far about it, they have sat down with me and actually had a big long conversation that lasts about 2 hours,
Wow.
about what they think happened and this and this. And my mother even, she was on this case for a couple months at least. And then she kind of gave up because she's very much like me, where she gets frustrated if she can't find an answer. But even she said, like, there's something going on, and I don't really believe that it was a murder, suicide, and whatever. So I mean, everybody that I've talked to believes the same thing, that I don't think he killed himself and his wife and kid. But I mean, I guess everybody to their own opinion, right?
Sure. Sure. That's interesting. I had no idea. No idea
Yeah.
that they were. I mean, that's great because that's obviously, you know, we want to reach as many people as possible. So it's great that younger people are looking into it. It's kind of weird that I find in my experience that younger people are actually more open to it, which is that's fascinating.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think it's because we're just kind of coming into the world of adulthood.
Hmm.
I mean, especially in Canada, we were given like it when we turn 16, we become like you're about to be an adult kind of thing. So we get more open to things like this where, we actually get to look at different things. Like even in my high school, we have a criminology course. Well, at least when I was in high school, we had a criminology course that would go into looking into different cases like David's. And I know for sure my English class looked into the Stephen Avery case.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, which, if anybody watches
That's
Netflix, you would
amazing.
probably know exactly what it is, the Making a Murderer case. And I
Mhm.
actually,
Yeah.
yeah, he just, I think he's being released soon, so that's good.
Wow.
But I know that we usually, like, we watch a bunch of different documentaries on different things, and yeah, I see you looking that up, Greg.
Yeah. Do I have the right one
Yeah,
here?
yep, that's Stephen Avery.
Who's
But yeah,
Brendan
no.
Dassey?
So I'm not gonna go too much into this because
Okay.
it's a big thing. Stephen
Yeah.
Avery is he's obviously an American. Him and his Brendan Dassey is his nephew. And Brendan actually got Stephen convicted.
Okay.
So Brendan was arrested because he was also apparently he helped Stephen kill a lady named Teresa Hallbach. And in my opinion, most of the evidence that the police found was actually planted because they originally, about I think it was a year before, had put Stephen Avery in jail for raping I can't remember her name, some lady, when it was actually another guy. He was let go, and then they had to figure out a way to get him back um, into jail. So they planted a bunch of evidence, including Stephen's blood from a vial from the year before, and a bunch of other stuff. And Brendan actually, he has mental problems. Like he's got
I was just gonna ask you, doesn't he have um like a like a really low IQ. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not being mean or
No,
anything,
no.
but
Uh,
he's developmentally delayed.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
he's delayed. And basically when the police brought him into questioning, they had asked him like, different questions and kind of coursed him through his statement,
Mhm.
and then promised him that he was going back to school because he was constantly every couple minutes he'd ask, "Am I going back to school yet?" Like blah blah. And basically they told him that he was going back to school. He gave them this false statement that he helped Steven slit Teresa's wrist or slit Teresa's throat and this and whatever. And then they basically convicted Brendan Dassey. Um, and
Mhm.
then
And he didn't have an attorney with him during that entire time of questioning.
no,
And
he didn't
even
have.
though they read him Miranda rights, they didn't take into consideration calling in social services or anyone like that with him
Yeah.
being developmentally delayed. So, I mean,
Um,
that in itself is just insane.
yeah,
Sorry to
he didn't.
interrupt you, but
No, it's okay. He didn't have a lawyer in the room. And he did not have a he didn't have his mother in the room either. They wouldn't allow him to call his mom to have her down there at all either. And I think Brendan was about 16, 17 when this
mhm.
happened. So,
Yeah.
I mean, legally, I think I'm not top notch on my American laws, but I'm pretty sure that in the States you have to have a parent if you're under the age of 8 to 18, I think it is.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Something
You
like
do.
that.
Yeah.
I know in
Yes,
Canada
you
you
do.
have to be 16 and under to have a parent, but that's Canada. But he didn't have his parent or his mother. He wasn't allowed to call her. He wasn't allowed to have a phone call. They kept him in the room. I believe it was between 6 and 7 hours they were sitting in the
Mhm.
room, constantly just telling him, well, you need to tell us, you need to tell us. And then he came out with this false story that they had basically created in his head, made him think that he actually did it. And then he was convicted, and then Steven was also convicted as well. Greg,
Yeah.
I'm just
There's a
noticing.
documentary on Netflix about it, isn't there?
Yeah, it's the documentary is called Making a Murderer. It's two
Yeah.
seasons. It's two seasons, although
Mhm.
the first season is more informative than the second one, I find, but that's just me.
It's two
I don't know
seasons
if you know.
on this case.
Yep,
Oh
there's two
wow.
seasons on. Yep. I don't know if you know the name Kathleen Zellner, Greg.
Mm-mm.
She's like one of the biggest. Well, I don't know, I'm not really like up to date on my information about her, but I know that she's one of the best attorneys in um yeah, she's one of the best attorneys in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually, yeah, that's her. She actually took Stephen's case pro bono. And she was doing everything. She released a bunch of stuff to the public and the press, and like uh, gave documents and everything else. And she was trying to help him get out. And then I think it was about 2 weeks ago, somebody in the actual jail, and I believe it was actually the guy that had raped the lady the year before, he actually confessed to killing Teresa Halbach. So Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey are going to probably get released soon. Although I don't know if the police are going to let that happen, because if they do, I mean, Stephen Avery can go after them for 10.2 mil.
Wow.
So
Mhm.
because it's his second time being convicted, and the first time he actually, as soon as he got out, he went after them for 6 mil. And then they put him back in jail because they didn't want to pay it.
That's disturbing.
Wow.
So, yeah. So this is just like, I'm all for this case. Like, this Stephen Avery case has just gotten me going. Like, I love this case, but at the same time, I mean, I'm just waiting for them to get out. And I've talked to his brother. I've talked to his parents. It's just it's crazy.
It's dark.
Well,
But
and one thing that's interesting about it that's parallel to the case that we're talking about is, I mean, it goes to show the snap judgments that law enforcement officials can make. I'm not saying they all do, but I'm just saying that some can make, and once they get in their head a certain theory going, it's really hard to get them to look, in another direction. It's like, a dog with a bone. They get this idea, and they're convinced that that's what it is, and so they just start looking for evidence to prove their theory rather than looking for evidence and letting the evidence lead them to the truth.
Exactly. And I know for sure in the Stephen Avery case, this was a big thing where they found, I don't think it was human bones, but they had found bones in his burn barrel in the yard.
Yeah.
And and that's basically what they convicted him on, because they found bones. They didn't test them. They didn't do any tests.
Well,
they didn't swab the blood. They didn't do any tests at all about how, they didn't do any tests on the RAV4. They didn't do any tests on her body, or they didn't even find her body, but they didn't do any tests on anything found in the crime scene. They just kind of went off substantial evidence and kind of, this is what we think it is, so this is what we're going for. You know what I mean? So, and I mean, it is
because that was the last place that she was known to go, because she took pictures for one of those like little flyer, the little book company, Auto Trader magazine.
Because
because that was the last place she went, and her car was there, which like no one could just hide her car there. I mean, that would just be impossible for someone to do, wouldn't it?
Also, just to give kind of a little bit of background on Teresa too, I mean, she was in contact with Stephen Avery for months before she decided to come and take the pictures, because Stephen Avery actually, they own a what do they call it? It's a scrapyard for vehicles. And people can go in and just buy vehicles and whatever. So I mean, it was just inevitable, and I kind of figured it was just everything, all the evidence that they found was substantial. They found Stephen's blood in the sink, and they were like, oh well, it's Teresa's blood. And years later it was tested, and it turned out to be Stephen's blood. So it was just it's just so many things that this police department just went nuts, and it's just my head hurts.
And it's because they had a specific narrative that they were going with, and they wanted to prove, so they just looked for as much stuff that they could find to prove that narrative, and to convince a jury that it is true. I mean, and like you said, it was all circumstantial. I mean, it's not like someone couldn't have, because the way that car was hidden way back in the lot, and it was covered in brush and stuff like that. So someone could have easily gotten that vehicle in there and planted it there, and like you said, the bones in the drum, and then with putting pressure on I can't remember his name again, his nephew Brendan, putting pressure on him and making him crack. I mean, anyone that's not special needs is gonna be under a tremendous amount of stress being questioned for that long. And so that just goes to show it happens. It happens a lot. It's just like, I know statistically a lot of crimes that occur, it'll be domestic, it'll be a family member because of statistics. But the thing is a lot of times when things happen, they get so fixated on, okay, well, the spouse had to have done it because statistically the spouse did it. And so a lot of times people get convicted wrongly, or they lose who they should be looking for because they're, I think it's pride or something. It just gets in the way, and they're just so convinced and fixated on being right rather than seeking the truth.
Oh, sorry. I just looked up the uh the rape that he was convicted for. He was actually convicted and he was in jail for 18 years before he was exonerated by DNA.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, so he spent 18 years in jail for a rape that he didn't even do. And the lady's name is actually Penny Bernstein.
Didn't that
And then
group that helps get people exonerated, weren't they the ones that finally got him exonerated?
I'm pretty sure that
Um,
was actually exactly what Greg is looking at right now, the Innocent Project.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
they had actually pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed to get different evidence and things tested. And yeah, so
See, I've often wondered if they could be contacted. I mean, I don't know if they would do anything because David is deceased, but that's what they specialize in, is exonerating people that, have been wrongly convicted. No, I don't think he was convicted because he was deceased, but I wonder if they heard about this and, someone sat down and talked to them, if, they would be willing to look into it to clear his name.
Or maybe even give us some
Because the
tips.
thing is because, well, and the thing is, because if he didn't do it, whoever did is still alive, more than likely. Therefore, they need to be convicted.
Yeah, there should be some place that should help dead, people that have been or have been whatever, accused of things but are dead, and it
Mhm.
just kind of dies there. That's what Thread Killer and She Wolf and Bugs are talking about in the chat there. That, yeah, like you said, because he's
I was
dead.
telling Sophia, I can't see anything. I haven't been able to link up yet that way, so I'm blind. I'm
Okay,
flying
that's okay.
blind here.
That's all right. I will make sure I post. I'll try to post things in the comments for us here too, because there are some really good comments going back and forth there. But maybe
Okay,
maybe
that would
this
be
group
good.
would think about getting a like a sister company, or maybe they could, a little branch off that might look into that. I don't know how often that happens. I don't know if
Mhm.
this thing happens to
I
many
know they've
people.
exonerated. They've gotten a lot of people exonerated that have been wrongly convicted. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
they've
I'm just
been amazing. I mean, they've gotten people that were on death row released, and like people that were put in jail, like a lot of African American people that were convicted wrongly, like back in the 50s and the 60s of rape and stuff like that. They've gotten them exonerated, and I mean they have done amazing work.
That's really great.
in my opinion, I mean, I'm not trying to shut down the idea because it's a great idea. Trying to get the Innocence Project to come and actually like them to come and see kind of the evidence and everything else. Although I don't personally think that they would be interested in actually looking into the evidence because like everybody's saying in the group chat, I mean, I feel like it's only for people who are kind of like already incarcerated.
Yeah.
And people who are kind of locked up trying to get out because they are pleading innocent and everything else. So I just, in my opinion, they may be able to give you some kind of information on like what to do and what to ask for properly.
Right.
But aside from that, I don't think that they would be able to do anything just because David is passed.
Right, and that's a good step forward too. I mean, really anything that gets us closer, is a good
Exactly.
step forward. We know that there's a lot of people out there that want to just stop us, that just want to make sure that nobody new looks into this case. But as you can clearly see, the more people that are informed about David Crowley and what happened to him and his family, the more people have questions, and they do get very frustrated. But it's very very clear that people clearly understand that there's just there's no way that this guy is guilty, and at the same time, how do you prove a dead person guilty? It just gets into to
Exactly.
so many different things. But maybe there's a group out there that does specialize in people that are dead. That is, maybe there's a similar group out
Yeah,
there.
but because the thing is like I said, okay, that people may not think it's a big deal proving him innocent because he's deceased and everything, and people may think, well, when we're all gone and everything, everyone will know the truth. But the fact of the matter remains that if he didn't do it, someone did do it, and so someone that's guilty is out walking around there free. And are they going to do this to someone else?
Right, right, and that's the biggest
The
question.
level of hatred and violence that was involved in this murder case,
Mm-hmm.
and they haven't done it again, baffles my mind. Well, that we know of.
That we know of, right? Right. You never know. You just
They
never
might
know.
have
Yeah,
gotten
other
better.
things.
I mean, because this was such a sloppy job. I mean, they might have gotten better at covering their tracks.
Maybe
Who
they
knows?
learned a lot, right? They learned a lot from
Mm-hmm.
all the mistakes that they made here. Well, getting back to, I think we're almost done with the notepad section here. Just page 297. Looks like a scene, maybe a scene from one of David's films, or from the scripts that he was actually working on. This looks like one of those scenes that you see when somebody's going to break into when the police are going to kick down the doors, blah blah blah. That's kind of the take that I got from this. A lot of it is hard to understand, and the writing is so fast. If anybody wants to talk about the writing, but it's like he's writing as he's thinking it out, right? It's kind of the and
Yeah. I know for me, I'm sitting here looking at it and I'm definitely having a hard time.
of course, yeah. I mean,
I
one of
don't
the
usually
things, yeah.
I don't usually have a hard time reading people's writing, but this is
Yeah,
just
I had to print it out just to be able to focus on
yeah,
it.
I feel that. Yeah.
So what I make out is stand by, something confirmed, bring them in.
Did confirm.
Yeah, dead up the picture, bring up the or clear up the picture, please. So they're looking at something. They're monitoring somebody's house, and they're about to go and kick the door in or something. It says, okay, house confirmed. Moving. They're moving now. Okay. So it's like two people talking. Exit. Yeah, we're moving on the target house now. Proceed to the scene. And then a dispatch 2106, 2104. These are cops kicking down the door, right?
Interesting.
And that would be page 34, F. So the front of page 34. And this could have been made back in 2013. There were some videos that David made where he was where they were filming basically that police kicking down doors and taking people out.
Mm-hmm.
Where they were taking them to, I haven't read the script, so I don't know. To a FEMA camp, I guess, based on some of the trailers and some of the photos and stuff that's out there. But so I don't know when this was written. We can't really tell. But this was on the notepad, on the part of the notepad that was after the blood writing or whatever, the submit to Allah now.
Yeah, that's one of the scenes that they show that they're filming in the documentary, because the kids are involved, and he says the safe word is banana, because
Right.
he says, the police are going to come in, they're going to be bashing in the door, he wants them without their shoes on, they're going to drag them out of the house, and it's going to be chaos and stuff like that. And even if they're saying stop and stuff like that, they're not going to stop. So if they really are scared, the safe word is banana, and all the kids think it's hilarious. So that's definitely a scene that they were filming.
Right. And here's page 298. Fun showed themselves. It's a behind-the-scenes video, and so these will probably be, these are probably meant to be more little trailer videos that they were going to put out leading up to the movie coming out. I don't know. I mean, some of this for me, the hardest part is trying to tell what's associated with the documentary that David was working on and what is associated with the fictional TV series that he was working on. Let's talk more shots. The vision, nationwide, beautiful shots. Humorous approach to length of time that it takes. And I think that's been a big thing because when I first learned about this case and going back through all of David's writings from 2012 to 2014, and everybody's like, where is this movie? Where is it? They donated, I think people donated like $60,000, and there was questions about what was that used for and whatever happened to it. But I don't know. That was just a whole nother issue here.
They're still asking about it.
Are there? Yeah, I mean, and because from what Ross, remember we had Ross on, and Ross actually was one of the people who gave them money for it. So, he has some type of credit. Basically, everybody who gave money to that project, to the $60,000, had some type of credit for it, because they believed in this, because they understand that this stuff is happening in other countries. Our soldiers at that time were kicking down doors on live TVs, on filming all of this stuff, and maybe it's stuff that they've been doing, that our soldiers have been doing for a long time. But once the video came out, seeing it makes a big difference. The power of video is, I mean, it can be used for good, for bad. It can be used for good here too. And looking at all of this stuff is what I was trying to actually figure out. So whereas my first view was that, David's movie was just fear porn, that all of this was just to make people scared and there's money involved and all that, the more that I look into it and the more that I looked at what he was writing here, the more that I see that I was wrong on that totally. Let's see. Okay, so we're still on 298. So we got some of the topics: the story, the politics, the travel, the production, the timeline. I mean, everything is very well thought out. All of this stuff is very well thought out by David, and then all of a sudden we're just supposed to think that he just kind of snaps and that's it, and just lets go of all of this stuff, all of this work, all of these plans, everything. He went to school to do film. This was going to be his life. This is what he was going to do for the rest of his life. He was serious, and he was about to do something very powerful, and then it's all gone, right? It just takes one slip and it's done, and he just ruins it all. It's hard to it wouldn't be so hard to buy that if the police could have given us proof, if they could have provided some type of motive for it, but they don't even have a motive for why David did what they claim he did. So we got the timeline. Let's see, 2012 Express Phase 1. So going back to 2012, the storyline, which is one of my, I really want to know what his latest storyline was, because I think it was a lot more spiritual, like he's been quoted as saying. And I think that might have pissed off a lot of people, because that's dollars going down your toilet. When you start talking about God, you start talking about Jesus in Hollywood, it's very, very tough. It's not going to work, especially if you're a first-time person. If this is your first story and all that, you're going to get labeled as a Christian writer and all that stuff. So he was definitely up against the wall here. Now, the RNC and Bilderberg trip. So this does make me think that this was kind of part of the Rise, because that was used in the Rise. And David was there in 2012 at the Bilderberg trip. And I do believe that Jim Tucker, who was researching the whole Bilderberg issue for many, many years, I do believe that he was still alive in 2012, if I remember correctly. Now, here's an interesting one, because this is the hardening of Danny Mason. That's what I got from this. I don't know, maybe I'm reading it wrong, but this is interesting quote because Mason Hendricks said something very similar about how they would pick on Danny Mason when they were doing trainings, and because he wasn't a soldier, he's kind of smaller and stuff, and they all kind of ribbed each other from what Hendricks was saying, but it was a big, like, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but everybody was measuring themselves. All the guys were measuring to themselves against each other, sizing each other up. Let's say, okay. So when I see the hardening of Danny Mason, I was like, what? I obviously that's not what they're talking about. It's about taking him, who was soft, and for whatever reason they were able to kind of harden him for this role. Blah blah blah. I'm not really sure. So that did really stand out to me. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Or else we're going to check some of the comments in the chat here.
Sorry, the hubby just called.
Oh.
So I missed all of that.
That's okay. That's all right. We're just going through this page and reading David's notes and trying to figure out the timeline, and the hardening of Danny Mason was kind of the one that kind of stuck out because Mason Hendricks, had kind of talked about how Danny Mason was kind of soft, and they had to really show him everything. Didn't know how to use a gun or hold a gun, just all of this stuff, right? And just really trying to make Danny Mason seem like he's just weak. That was my view when I spoke to Mason Hendricks. So
I was wondering what that word was. I was sitting here looking at it and I couldn't figure out what it said.
if it's not hardening, I don't know what it is. Now it looks like there's a few things written here. So I don't know if it was like, it's almost like an R, or I don't know. I don't know. It looks like an
R,
H.
but then an H over top of it.
Right. So I don't know what that was meant to be or whatever. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that just kind of stuck out. Because I know that Danny Mason and some of the other Gray State team members have had some issues. They've had some conflicts, and I think that a lot of that has been even after David died, and the whole rights to who owns what, and who's going to take on the Gray State YouTube channel, and who's going to run this, and who's going to move forward with it. And when Hendricks saw Danny Mason moving forward, creating a trailer or some type of footage with Joe Biggs, he was pissed, and he told Danny Mason, that you can't do this. You have to get credit. You have to get ownership. And Hendricks felt that Dan Crowley Sr. is the one that owns all of this stuff, and I think a lot of them feel like that. So there's a lot of internal struggles that have been happening for a long time between that Gray State quote unquote team. They only come together to go after us.
And it's interesting because even before David's death, he was trying to, which I'm pointing out the obvious, y'all already know this, but him trying to get him to sign his rights away.
Right.
That was for the trailer, or is it for the movie?
That was for
I can't ever keep track of which one it's for.
Yeah, that was for David's movie, so that David could move forward with it and turn it into a TV series.
Yeah, and he didn't want to. I mean, they went back and forth about that. And I think that's where, in the documentary where his dad reads something about what should he do about Danny Mason, and he says he thinks he was joking about it. That was his way of humor, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it still shows that he was still kind of, you know, having a hard time because it seemed like they just couldn't come to an agreement or something and never did.
Right. Yeah. And then Riot plus Eric. I don't know what that last one is. It must be Eric. I can't think of anything else. Maybe Eric Holder. I don't know, but I think Eric Holder is spelled ERIC. So I don't know. But Riot, obviously, we know that was a big part of David's trailer too. Page 299, pitch video, day 1, Sirius. So this is the pitch video. Now, who they're pitching to, what the pitch is, I don't know if this is for the mics, because David did pitch them, whatever he pitched them, I think around May, but David showed the 2 mics, the latest trailer, in September of 2014. I don't know if that was one of the trailers that was put out after David died, because there were, I think, 2 of them, or if this is one that only the mics have seen and nobody else has. But I'd be very curious about that, and I would be curious to know who owns the script, and I'd like to see it myself. But so, combat veteran, this is it. This is the attack. Dug deep into America to check temperature. I'm learning, but what I'm learning is the knowledge of psychology and persuasion and the very tools of the enemy. And that's dangerous. I do believe that that's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to learn that, put yourself, I think, in a very vulnerable spot, because you're trying to understand what you're fighting against, but you can end up sympathizing with it, or you can end up letting it pretty much take you over. So that was another line that kind of stuck out to me. The big money will have to acknowledge what you and I create. So I don't know obviously if he's pitching that to the mics, then that's who he's talking to. So that would make sense to me. Lack of communication between vets and others is frustrating. Now that's a big thing there, because so many people who think that every vet must have PTSD, or it's just easier to say that every soldier, has PTSD or anything like that. There is a disconnect between some people who are so anti-military, so anti-government, and I don't believe that David was anti-government either, and I don't believe he was anti-military either. I think, and I could be wrong, only David knows for sure, but I think he understood that there was something else, that there was something gray, that was not just your typical good guy, bad guy, and I think everybody knows that, but I think he saw it, and how gray things can actually be when you are serving your country, and at the same time being called a baby killer and all that stuff. It's I don't know. I'd hate to be in that spot.
It's not pleasant to be in.
No, and you are a soldier, right? Or you're a former soldier. So is there a disconnect?
You mean for us?
Yeah.
For
Do you feel disconnected from just the general public? Do you feel that in general that there is the general public just doesn't understand what soldiers go through or have gone through, or what it's like after service? Because I think that's a big thing that doesn't really get talked about much too. It's like, okay, yeah, you served your country. Well, General Patton served his country, and then after what? It's just this, I don't know. Just rambling.
I think there is. I think, it's actually really interesting because, I think times have changed so drastically since the Vietnam War, you know, Sonny, you mentioned Patton, but, you know, if you served, you know, before the Vietnam War, I think it was also just because of how the times were and everything, but you would be able to come home and you would be able to get a decent job, and you people were actually kind of respected and you know, held to a good standard, you know, because they served. And when Vietnam happened, the tide shifted, and you know, that's when it was like, if you were a veteran, you know, I mean, there are people that embrace you, but there are also a lot of people that loathe you purely for the reason that you served. I mean, I mean, my husband's a veteran, and he served 20 years, and it's unbelievable. I mean, the way how difficult it is for someone that devotes their entire life to serving in the military to finding decent employment. And also, you know, I mean, I know they're working on it, but veterans care. I mean, the number of veterans that have actually PTSD that have gone in to actual veterans hospitals and killed people because they can't get the care that they're asking for and that they need, because they feel like they're not being heard. And I'm not saying it's excusable. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that it's excusable to go in and do something like that. But what I'm saying is, I just feel like you're saying there is a huge disconnect that I mean, I think some of them even feel like they've been betrayed by the very people that they've served. And I can personally say that from people that I know that I've talked to, even within the military itself, a lot of people have gotten out sooner than they would have, because there has been such a shift, because it has become so political. And I don't mean political in the sense of Democrat and Republican. What I mean is, it's just a bunch of backbiting and backstabbing and people stepping over each other. The camaraderie is really starting to disintegrate, and I think that's because of morale. And so when morale gets low, people kind of go into their, you know, I'm going to survive mode, and they'll do whatever they have to whoever they have to in order to survive.
Right.
So I think there's a huge disconnect on many levels. And I support our military, and I love our military. And so I'm not talking bad about the military, but I mean, I do think that there are things that do need to be looked at and adjusted.
Yep. They need to be helped. They need to be taken care of, for sure. We see it firsthand. You know, people who leave and go to service, and I've seen it, especially with younger people, right around the Iraqi war and all of that stuff that was happening. Man, I've seen, you know, people. They just were not the same, and never have been the same, and never will be, and shouldn't be expected to be the same person as when they left. You know what I mean? But yeah, I totally agree with that. More should be done, and maybe this film might have helped that.
The number of homeless veterans is just off the map.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
That should not be.
How large of the homeless community are veterans.
Yeah, it should not be.
so that shows there is for sure, and so he was definitely hitting on something.
Yeah,
And,
definitely.
and I think also, like he was saying too, between veterans, a disconnect between veterans, and that goes to because with them amongst each other, they're just trying to survive. You know what I mean? They're trying to do whatever they can, so they don't really band together. Like, you know, I'm sure a lot of you have seen or heard about Band of Brothers and all of these people. They stayed in contact with each other, you know, for years, you know, not continually, but they maintained contact with each other for years. And that kind of thing just doesn't happen that often anymore. Everyone kind of just, and I think one reason is because there's so much ugliness that they see that they don't want to see the people that they associate that with, because they're not helped to cope with what they're seeing and what's going on.
That's right. David also here writes about my particular vision. And this is the biggest thing here that makes me think that this was written sometime between late August and September, or sometime after September, I would say, maybe, because of the topics are film versus series. Now, it's very important, and I don't know when this happened, but it's very important to try to understand when it turned from a film that David was going to make into a series. We can see that on September 30th, while David is answering questions on his Facebook page, he's talking about how a series would be better and how a series could lead into a film. And I think, you know, I don't know. I think they were probably onto something. Another topic is the veteran, and I can't tell if it's IGS or LGS. Veterans Angle is what it is, and it says "This is me." So you know, he was selling himself while he's pitching this, right? This is you know, the Mikes aren't just investing into this story. Oh, it's such a great story. It seems like they're investing into David, and they're investing into the credibility that David would bring to a project like this, which is not just some snot-nosed kid who's fresh out of film school who's a trust fund baby or something like that. This is somebody who was over there. This is somebody who has served, who has killed people, who has seen people killed, and who was there during one of the worst wars. Definitely the worst war of my lifetime. Maybe one of the worst wars ever. That was treasonous. That had no purpose. That should have never started. Two wars. You know, and that's a whole nother issue. And that is a very dangerous topic. When you think about people like Pat Tillman, you know, Pat Tillman is a perfect example. And it's so clear cut what happened to Pat Tillman. There's been cases on it. There's some great books. I found a book at Target, and I was like, wow, this is great. This is like mainstream stuff. So it is out there. And a film like this, a series like this, would have also shown, would have helped soldiers, would help our cops, the cops that are, you know, in our areas here. Don't do this. Make sure it never gets to this. Never gets to where we're kicking down doors here. You know, it just all of this different stuff. So anyways, violence in society, which is a big one, and look at it now. I mean, look at the violence that we're seeing now, and it's some of this stuff is just so, it's just crazy. Now the RNC and Bilderberg trips, the radio shows, celebrities, I'm guessing, which can also be another dangerous road depending on what celebrities you're associating with. But the Boston trip was really the big one, because the Boston bombing, and I don't know what your guys' views are on the Boston bombing, but I definitely don't think that, you know, it was two people who had uh, pressure cookers or whatever they were trying to say. I don't believe in any of that. Well, they were there. David was there, and some of the Gray State team were also there too. So they were documenting that. I mean, this could also have been part of it. But what we're talking about is government sponsored terrorism. I think that's really what this all comes down to. So I think that's why a lot of people would think, well, David Crowley was looking into government sponsored terrorism. He's dead. Must be a government sponsored hit. And there's nothing wrong with starting there and trying to figure out what are the facts, what actually makes us think that there might be some value to that theory. And instead, that theory just got treated like, if you think that, then you're crazy. There's something wrong with you. He's just a crazy soldier. But thinking that is fine. That's okay. But don't think that there might be some foul play involved in this stuff.
Well, and the thing is that the other angle as well, though, is just because say he was killed because he was looking into government-sponsored terrorism, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was a government hit. It could be some extremist.
True.
Or someone that was extremely offended. It doesn't necessarily have to be government-sponsored. I mean, there are people that feel strongly about certain things, and they take matters into their own hands all the time.
True.
And they think that they're actually doing the country a service by doing what they're doing. It's kind of like the people that bomb abortion clinics. Some people think that anyone that is against abortion supports the people that go around and blow up abortion clinics, which is not true. But they'll automatically look at everyone and go, oh, well, what about you? Do you not think what do you think about, them killing doctors and stuff? And it's like, that person does not represent me. I'm sorry. And so, I mean, it could be the same thing. I mean, I'm not saying that's my theory, but I'm just saying it wouldn't necessarily have to have been sponsored by the government for that scenario to take place.
No, definitely not. And I guess that's the whole thing. What do you think? What do you think about this case so far? As far as like, what theories are you open to? And I think so, Thea, you haven't jumped in here either in a little while. So I mean, are there any theories that you both have kind of ruled out, or any that you're kind of strongly leaning towards? You don't have to tell us what the theories are, but are there some that you feel more?
I have one theory that I believe, and I think it had a lot to do with money and other things, other personal issues and money.
Finances and
But that's as far as I'll go with it.
I think it's pretty much rolled out a hate crime kind of thing. I think it was staged to look like a hate crime, but I do not believe it was actually that. And
I think there was a confrontation. Oh, I'm sorry. You paused. I thought you were finished. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
I don't think, I'll put it this way, I don't think that it was a situation where people said, oh, we're going to go over there and we're going to kill them. I think what happened is there was things escalated, there was an altercation, and things got out of hand. And I'm not saying I think David did it. I'm saying that I think that he had an altercation with people that he had a disagreement with for numerous reasons, and things just got way out of control, and maybe other people may have been called in after the fact to help because things got out of hand.
Okay, are
But I
you...
like breathing, so I'm not saying anymore.
All right, well, here we are, page 300 here, and this is the test group. Secrecy is what it looks like. So these might have been the people that were involved in the gray state, maybe people that were given it. I think these are the advanced copy people, maybe. So what's interesting is a person that ended up leaking, or quote unquote leaking, I guess, the rough cut is not one of these people on here. So I was very curious about that. But you can look at some of these names here, what their reactions are, who's given their feedback, I guess. The Sean Wright one obviously is one that really stands out to me because there's a question mark there and there's nothing there. So Sean Wright, who claimed to be one of the last people to ever see David, I think told Dan Hennon that Sean Wright said that he was David's quote-unquote personal Rolodex, even though he didn't have David Crowley's phone number for some reason. So that was weird. But his name is also crossed off here. But again, there's nothing next to him. So very similar to the way that Sean Wright he's mentioned in the 94 pages of police reports, but a report about him is not in there, whereas the one about Danny Mason is. We know that police talked to Mason Hendricks too. He's not even mentioned in those 94 pages. So why are there people that the police spoke to that are not mentioned? Their testimony is not part of the 94 pages, but other people are, including David's family and including Danny Mason. I do think there was, a lot of focus that people wanted to put the focus on Danny Mason for whatever reason. Let's see here. Adam Gislason, I think his name is. So he's here. He was in the documentary. Eric Pakisser was in the Rise, the documentary Rise. He's the guy who David and Kamel, I think in 2009, took a training course to actually open carry, so some type of a firearms course. And he's a very interesting guy, but in the Rise, he's heavily featured in that. So he's another interesting one. Out of all of these people here, I would be curious to see how many of these actually think that, David's not guilty. Now, on this list, how many people would actually go public saying that and wouldn't be cowards to say that? And how many people actually truly think that? I think that's a big thing. And I have not, I probably haven't contacted half of these people here, so I don't know yet. Zach Carter is another interesting one, because Zach Carter is kind of like a liaison between David Crowley and the two Mikes. Zach Carter worked closely with them. So he was working very closely with them. So I don't know why some people are crossed off here. I don't know why some people are checkmarked as sent, right? There's a question mark, all of these different things. So that was difficult.
One thing I was going to say, because you mentioned the two Mikes again,
Yeah.
that I find really interesting is, in the documentary, they speak to them about him before they play that audio of him prepping for his meeting, and they talk about how great he was and everything, and they don't really say they think he did it or they didn't think he did it or whatever, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then they play that audio clip, and you can just see in their faces the shift of their thought process about him. And I mean, and he even says, you know, that's the most divisive load of, you know, I've ever heard in my life. You know, and you just see the shift, and it's almost like they automatically, like this light bulb goes off, and they think he did it. You know, because of that audio clip that they were played.
Right.
Because they're led to believe, even though they've had all of these encounters with him, and they've already developed their own idea of who he is and their own thoughts and feelings about who he is, they take one audio clip and they play it for them, and they completely change their entire perspective and feelings about this person. And that just shows how freaking powerful what that documentary, how powerful it is, how it can absolutely change someone's thought processes about him. Because they didn't think he was a bad person. You can tell by the way they were talking about him in the beginning. They didn't think he was a bad person.
That's right.
And then it was just really interesting that they choose the documentary to actually show it to them then to get an immediate reaction.
I find it very interesting.
Sophia.
People who have researched this case and are very adamant on David being innocent, and then they go and speak with either, you know, like somebody connected to the case, and all of a sudden they just turn around and agree with the narrative. It's like, what did you see? What proof were you handed to suddenly, you know, change your mind and start hating everybody who was believing that David was innocent? I mean, we're all entitled to our beliefs, especially after we've been researching this case with the information that we have. And, you know, they're like, oh, he's guilty, and we've seen it, but they never provide their proof. Never provide it.
Yes. Well, some people, I think it's green paper with pictures of presidents on it, is what they do.
Yeah. You think?
They were given some.
People get brainwashed like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that too, and you get to a point where it's like this looks like a program here, when you have people that come in and they're like, oh yeah, you know, this happened, and hey man, you know, you guys are doing great, and I really want to help out and everything, and all they do is just gather intelligence and then just say, oh yeah, David's guilty, and that's it, you know. You guys are crazy. It is like a flip of a switch, and that's been happening since the case first started. All of the guys who wanted the admin rights to Dan Hannon's Facebook group, all the guys who wanted the admin rights to Thomas Lapp's Facebook page, that's what happened. That's how they acted. That's how Sean Wright was. They're nice, everything's cool, and then they get to a point where they realize that, you know what, they're not backing down, and then that's when they get angry, and that's when they kind of turn. So, you know, and that program has evolved over the 5 years here, but it's still the same program. You know, it's just a updated version. It's like Windows 10. That's all it is. It's still Windows. It still sucks, but you know, it's just a better version of it. So.
Well, I just want to, and since you're on that topic, I mean, I have experience with that, which I was relatively new with the group, and the level of intimidation that the people will use, and how aggressive and hostile people will be, it just really makes me wonder, you know, why. I mean, we can disagree on something. I just believe something completely different. And people can say, well, people are upset because they think that we're hurting the family and everything. Well, the family doesn't have to look at the page. And I'm not being mean or I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but they don't have to look at the page. If they, if they're sensitive to the subject, they don't have to look at it. We're not trying, obviously we're not trying in any way to harm the families or trying to either harm, David or Kamel or Franny. I mean, it's completely the opposite. And I just really call into question the lengths that people will go to. I mean, my life was threatened. Someone threatened my life.
Over what? Over this case?
Over
Yes.
over the case.
No way. Why?
Yes. Because I called them out on something that they said that was really, because they talk about being concerned about disrespecting the families and
So their answer is to take your
trying to be
life?
sensitive, and they posted something that was extremely insensitive to the family and to other people involved, and they threatened my life, and someone else did. And they threatened to contact the Clinton administration too.
What are they gonna do?
Oh, they're going to kill me. They're going to kill me. Apparently, they have connections, and the Clintons are going to come kill me.
So you're wrong for looking into this case, and but their answer is to kill you. Is to do what same thing that happened to David. I mean, it's just the logic is so backwards with these people. It's
There is no logic.
It's
And
ridiculous.
why be so aggressive and violent, about something if they know the truth. If they know the truth for what it is and they think that we're wrong and they absolutely know the truth without doubt, then why threaten people for looking at something from a different perspective? Because there's no threat in
Right.
proving something different if the truth is out. If they know the truth and there's no way we'll ever reveal anything else, then why feel so threatened to threaten someone's life?
Right. What are they really threatened by?
Exactly.
Yeah. And it just
And I'm not
shows.
the only person they've done it to.
No, I know. This happens way too much, and these people need to understand that God sees everything, and things like that do not go unpunished, and that's where I stand on it.
Mhm.
Looking at page 301 on veterans, which is another interesting thing. I think it's everything. This whole thing is from David's view here. He says, "I do not speak for veterans. I speak for me, but I am a veteran, and these images are a direct response to my service." I'm curious to see what those images are, what the images were. These images are a direct response to my quote-unquote service. And even the way that he puts the quote-unquote service is like, oh, yeah.
It could have been the same information that was in the documentary.
About, like,
Where there,
tell me more.
there was one where he was talking about seeing a fellow soldier dying right in front of his eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and they had medics that were trying to help save this one person, and unfortunately, they weren't able to save him. It could have been that or other things that he had photos of.
It's crazy.
See, I didn't go overseas. My job was basically writing the TDY orders to send people overseas and processing people to base, off base, that kind of thing. I worked in the orderly room, so I didn't actually see wartime, but I did send people over there. Well, not, I didn't send them, I wrote the paperwork so that they could go. But I guess I was lucky in that regards.
Amen to that. Page 302 looks like clay gun, Milton flower set for Milton. I'm not. Do you know what that is?
I think this is David's handwriting, but he might be making notes for Camille.
GVM, and then there's
because
mhm.
this is all cake decorating, but it's David's handwriting.
Well, then there's like one of those sketches of a person's face and everything, which is typical if you're in film, you know, at some point, especially during the early pitches and everything, you know, you have to do it, see everything scene by scene, shot by shot. So I wonder if this was related to him just doodling or just practicing those different things and showing how this shot would be. You know, the character would be facing right, facing left, and it's page 39 of the front.
My mom does this a lot when she's on the phone talking to people. She will just absent-mindedly draw.
Interesting.
I doodle too.
Yeah, I do too. I don't do it that well. I just do like little stick figures running or something, or just loops and loops or something. But like this is like purpose, you know. I don't know. Maybe it's just at another level of doodle, a super doodle.
I think his mind was always going.
Yeah.
You know, I mean.
I think that's partially why he filmed everything.
And that's probably yeah. And so I mean maybe that drawing, like you said, is just something. I think he had more than one thought process going on at a time, and that's probably something that he popped into his head when he was, you know, writing something down. He like another part of his brain said, "Oh, okay," and then he drew that.
Yep. And then this is the back of that same page, and I think, yeah, like Sophia said, we're getting more into Camille's recipes, the cupcakes, all of that stuff here. So that's it for all of David's, for anything that David might have written in this notepad here. The rest is all Camille's writings. And, you know, that was one of the first things that threw me, is I had figured that David had flipped to the very end, but really he flips to the center for whatever reason. It's just random. It's not calculated. You know, it's not a calculated just flip. It's like a hurried flip or something. I don't know. That's the way that I kind of felt about that. And why use this page here? So as you can see here, we're, you know, looking at page 305. It flips to 41A-58, which means this is the 58th page, and this is the back. So compare that to what we have, page 40. So we go from the front page of page 40, and the next one we're given is page 58. So I don't know if we were given that just because the rest are blank, or if we need to request the rest of the pages, because they must have them. If they have these pages, they have all of the other ones. So why
unless they
weren't
were
we
torn
giving
out and
those?
thrown away.
Well, but then this wouldn't be labeled as 58. You know, it wouldn't skip from 40 to 58. You know what I mean? So they had pages at one time. Where are they? Or are they just blank? That would and I mean, this felt like a data dump. This is 488 pages. That was a data dump. So
It really was. I just asked for one thing, and they just sent me this whole entire file.
You know, one thing that I wanted to ask is because there's been talk that possibly not all of everything has been released to the group at the request of the families. But I mean, is that standard practice for with I mean with Freedom of Information Act, with a case? No, I can understand them not releasing everything if a case is so open and they're investigating it. But can a family actually suppress certain information from being released?
well, they did. I mean, this family did. Everything that was associated
But I mean, is
with
that
Allah.
standard practice? I mean, has anyone spoken with like any law enforcement people to see if that's like standard practice? I mean, do other police departments do that? Do other government agencies do that? Like,
I can
at
only
the request of the families, withhold certain information?
I can only speak
Well,
for
I
the
just
two locals
received
that I spoke to, and no, it's not. Go ahead, Sophia.
I just received a case a couple months ago that I requested, and it's a medium box. There's like 11 CDs in there, which I haven't been able to look at. And then there's tons and tons of paper that was just printed off, and I have like personal letters that were written back and forth. I have the entire military records that they got. I mean, I have so much information in regards to that case, and it's nothing like this case. I was able to read about all his, like I said, I did TDY paperwork. I was reading his TDY paperwork. I was reading about all the medals he received and everything for that case. And here you don't have that. You don't. I mean, it's just very sparse on the information that they.
Yeah, I just find that strange. I mean, I would think that Freedom of Information Act would overrule anything. I mean, that's why the Freedom of Information Act was made. I mean, so that people can get information. I mean, that's public information.
Yeah, and
And
I
this
know.
is why I really think an attorney would come to play for us.
Right.
Oh
Right.
yeah, for sure.
Because
Because I mean, that's your civil rights.
And we also, I mean, I know that there are certain things that they cannot release. There's like state statutes. Any photos of Rainey, that kind of thing, they weren't supposed to release that. It's all because of their state statutes. And
I mean,
but
the only thing
there are
that we've ever asked for is release whatever proves David Crowley guilty, and we were told that you've been given it. That's it. You know. So it's like, okay, well, if there's any information that has been hidden or anything that hasn't been given to us, from what we were told, it doesn't matter because it doesn't show that David Crowley is guilty. And trust me, if it did, that would be the first thing that they would give us.
Well, and I would be the first person to say, okay, yeah, he did. I mean, I'm a reasonable person. I wouldn't sit there and be like, no, I mean, if there was absolute proof, I would go, okay, yeah, there's the proof.
Right.
But I mean, just looking at documentaries. I mean, I just found it so weird. Like when they talked to that police chief, when the reporter asked him, he said, well, you know, because they accidentally got hold of the writing on the wall, and so they were asking them about that, and they asked him, you know, well, what do you think Allah Akbar meant? And he kind of stammered and said, well, I just think that was kind of a last jab.
Right.
Well, what does that mean? I mean, elaborate on that. And why didn't the reporter say, well, do you care to elaborate on that?
That would have been
what
nice.
Exactly does that mean? Real good reporting there.
That's right.
I mean,
Well, that's kind of like how reporters are anyway nowadays. They just don't ask those follow-up questions.
Why?
There's no real
Why?
reporting going on anymore.
It's
because, I mean,
such
that
a slam dunk.
That doesn't answer the question.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense. A last jab at what? A last jab at who? What? I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. It definitely does not. Any other final thoughts? Anything on the notepad before we move on to the 7 major mistakes in suicide investigation? This article is fascinating, by the way.
Let's do that one.
This is really amazing work here. It's going to be hard. I think it's going to be hard for people to see it, unfortunately. Let me see if I can. I probably should have printed this out as a PDF or something, but let's see if I can make that.
And
a
I'm
little
sorry,
bigger.
when I shared that, I should have warned people that there could be some bad pictures and stuff.
Mhm.
I've kind of just gotten, I'm not desensitized, it still affects me, but I've just gotten so used to like looking at stuff like that I didn't even think to, and so if I offended anyone or anything, I apologize.
Right, because you didn't mean to. You didn't intend to do that. It's just
No.
sharing this stuff here. You know what? I have not really checked the chat in that long here, and I'm usually a little bit better about this, but there has been some great chat. So I want to say again, thanks for everybody who is in the chat, who is joining us there, and one of the last chats that I see here is from Thread Killer, who has not killed this thread yet. So thank you for that. And Thread Killer says, "Were alibis given by all players?" This was one of the early questions that a lot of people had too, and the reason that like Bugs is saying, nope, they were never asked that, is because there was never any other theory. You know, I mean, we're talking within less than 24 hours of finding these bodies. There is no other theory, and not at any time ever is there ever. Do they even publicly, admit to any other theory or to anybody else that they were looking at? Now, I do kind of think that they might have been looking at other people. That certain investigators might have been actually doing their job and looking at other theories. And so when they hear that everybody thinks that the government did it, then, it really frustrates them. And I think a lot of the early government stuff was meant for them. It was meant for the investigators to make sure that they didn't do what we did with the Facebook group. Ask questions, look into other theories. Simple things like that. Because they were already being... from their view, they were targets, and I do believe that at some level, the Apple Valley Police were targeted, and might still be targeted, and it might be why some of them are no longer with the AVPD. Maybe it's 100% unrelated. But there are some very good questions in there, and I will try to I'll try to keep my
And
eyes open.
the other thing is like what Dan said in one of his videos. I can't remember which one it was, but he was talking to someone that he knew that was in law enforcement, and his friend, I think it was a friend of his, and he was explaining to him that basically what he was saying, and I'm not quoting him, I'm kind of just giving the gist of what I took from what he was saying, but basically what he was told was that the police departments, they have a chain of command, kind of like the military.
Right.
And so even if an officer or a detective has a different running theory, if their sergeant or whoever says, no, shut it down, this is the narrative, this is what happened, then you shut it down. You don't pursue it. You don't keep going. You do what you're told. So, I mean, that is another thing is, I mean, there may have been other people that had different theories, but they may have just been told, no, that's not what happened, and the case is closed.
Yep. These aren't the droids that you're looking for. There's nothing to see here. So, looking at the 7
right.
major mistakes in suicide investigation by Vernon J. Gerberth, MS, MPS, homicide and forensic consultant. Definitely a very interesting piece that we have here. The mistake number 1 is assuming the case is a suicide based on the initial report. If the case is reported as a suicide, police officers who respond as well as investigators automatically tend to treat the call as a suicide. That frustrates me. You know, like, why? Why would you do that? You know, you have a canvas. You have a blank canvas. Why jump there? You know, and we've talked about some of this as far as their training. And are they trained to just assume, well, this is, you know, we're just going to go with there's a suicide here. I don't know. That's always frustrated me.
Well, you remember the PI, how he had like a checklist. And I'm wondering if that's what they go through too. If they have like a pre-made checklist that they just go through and check off all the boxes. Oh, I guess this is, instead of thinking for themselves, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's like reading from a textbook.
I also think part of it is you know, obviously, I'm stating the obvious, but everyone is human. And so, depending on your personality type, some people are just more influenced by what they hear initially. You know what I mean? There are people that kind of go along with the flow, and then there are the people that are the troublemakers that ask questions like us. You know, and so if you don't have people that are serious questioners, you know, then I don't even know if that's a word, but if you don't have people like that you know, are willing to really question things, you know, if they initially hear that, if that word gets thrown out there in the air, you know, suicide, it gets thrown in the air, and it just gets grabbed a hold of, and they run with it.
Yep. And this author, I'm just going to read this one little part here that is, he says, I advise the 2 officers that they were not in a position to assume anything, and that a request for detectives to respond, in fact, meant that this was a crime scene. So, little different case there, but I think that should just be common sense. Why would you assume anything? Mistake number 2, assuming the suicide position at the crime scene. And we know that because there was a dog involved, whatever we want to believe, whatever we think the dog did or did not do, there was a dog involved. There was a convenient excuse to really think that, you know what, we really don't know. We don't know if this is where the gun was found. We don't know if this is where the bodies were, before the dog did anything. But the fact that there's no indication in any of the documents that we have that they tested to see if the dog did any of this is really odd. Really odd.
Mm-hmm.
That we would have to go to such lengths to reach out to them and still not get an answer. I really wish I would have made that one of the 21 questions. But back at that time, I didn't know as much as I know now. But that's a big question that one day they will need to answer that. The Apple Valley Police will need to answer that, and there's no reason why they shouldn't answer it. If they're able to answer how they missed a bullet and missed a bullet hole above their head, they should be able to answer if they tested that dog for... If they tested the feces.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
The crime scene cleanup, are they supposed to also take care of bullet holes?
That I don't know. I mean, they also didn't see it either.
Yeah, and that's why I was asking the question, because we have to wonder, was it there from the very beginning? Was it added there later? That kind of thing. If the crime scene cleanup was there and they didn't see it, if they were supposed to take care of bullet holes, I don't know. It was just something I was thinking about today.
Right.
In relation to, positioning and everything, why has it not been addressed? I mean, I'm not saying the group hasn't addressed it, but I mean, a huge thing. I mean, I know now that arms can move. Sophia found an amazing article about that arms can move during decomp. So, I mean, the body positioning as far as like the arms and everything, that's been explained. But the gun being by his left hand, and the medical examiner stating in the reports that the exit wound is on the left side of David's head. No one ever said anything. I mean, that's a huge thing. Okay, the gun's on by his left hand, and yet he supposedly shot himself in the right side of the head. I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't.
And it wasn't addressed. I mean, no one even, you would think they would at least explain that. Explain why they can come to the conclusion that it was a suicide. How does a gun move? I mean, that dog, there is no way that dog moved that gun all the way around to the other side of his body. Where, at least where it supposedly was found, because it seems like it was in too perfect of a place.
Is it possible that that's where the gun fell after he shot himself? That's been one of the questions.
I guess. I mean, anything is possible. I mean, the gun falls first. When a person shoots themselves, the gun falls first, then the body falls. So, it would really depend on where he was standing, but for him to be on his back, I don't see how it would have fallen all the way over to the other side. I see it more being underneath his body because it would just drop out of his hand. He would hold the gun up to his head. He would fire it. His arm would drop. When his arm dropped, the gun would drop. So that would mean the gun would have to bounce. The chances of the gun bouncing on a rug all the way over that way past his body, I would think, would be remote. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible because I'm not a forensics expert, but from what I have studied, the gun drops almost instantly because you lose control of your body. So the hand drops, the gun drops, the body drops.
Now,
so it would more likely be under his body.
And speaking of the way that his body drops, there's David's body is weird because he's in a crucifix, and his right hand is gone. It's missing. Half of his head is missing when we were told most of his head was missing. I don't know if that's accurate. But his left hand, the way that his left hand is very strange, and the symbolic hand gesture, that the hand is making, is very, very strange too. The fact that the dog did not choose to eat that hand, but ate the other one, it's just on and on and on.
He didn't go after. Well, he didn't even go after the toes.
And the other thing, if anyone is sensitive, stop listening for a second. But the other thing is, they were all shot with the same caliber bullet. David's head was gone. Kamel's gone. Ranny's intact.
Went through her head. The bullet went through her head. That's what it looks like, right?
And yet
but
the
not
dog didn't go after her body. Didn't go after her head.
Just her arm. It was So, I mean, when you think about that and you think about where Kamel was, it had much easier access to David's hands and to Ranya's, but it's just like we're just like, well, the dog, drew up a freaking menu and said, hey, I'd like to have a left arm of a child, or the arm of a child. I'm gonna take the right arm of this human, and I think I'll have both of the wife's, hands. It's just, it does not make sense. The way that it's just, it does not add up, and it's one of the most frustrating things that I've found here, and I think any dog lover, and I'm not a dog lover, but any dog lover, any dog owner, I think this case has been able to resonate with them on that value of, wait a minute, you guys are accusing this dog of doing all this? No way.
And then the other thing, like, that relates to body position is if you look at David's body, if you go through all the different scenarios of how he could have been when he shot himself, it's just weird. Because if he were standing, he would have had to, and I am repeating myself, I've talked about this in other conference, but if in case anyone hasn't heard, if he were standing, he would have had to have been crushed up against the couch in order to fall in the position that he fell in. If he were sitting, I mean, I guess he could have been sitting, but if he were sitting, then the gun definitely wouldn't have fallen over by his left hand. The only way the gun could have fallen that far, if that's even possible, would have been if he were standing. And why would he stand there and do that? It's just a weird position.
Mistake number 3, not handling the suicide as a homicide investigation. Um, I'm sure you guys, I'm sure everybody has their own view on this, but this is a key thing here. I mean, this person that wrote this story here, I'd love to just interview them, to pick their brain, to ask questions. These are the type of people that we all know. You might not think that you know somebody like this, but you know somebody who knows somebody who might know someone who can answer this stuff, or we can just pick their brains to understand um, how police come to this conclusion, and how can we make sure that a case like this, that this doesn't happen again. There are investigators out there. There are people who want to become crime scene investigators that can learn a lot from reading things like this, from looking at cases like this, and comparing of what should be to what could be to what is. How do you not walk into a crime scene like the David Crowley crime scene and say, we're going to treat this as a homicide investigation? Why were they so quick to treat this as a murder-suicide? It's been one of the ongoing questions.
And why did the medical examiner not treat it as initially starting out as unknown? You know what I mean? Like, you can tell that they just went with the narrative that the police told them, and the detectives were present for the autopsies. There were a couple of them present. So, I mean, I don't think that even the medical examiner really looked at it with a clean slate, so to speak, and kind of connected the dots based off of what they found. I think they were just kind of going through the autopsy to prove the narrative. Because none of what was found in the autopsy proves that it was a murder-suicide.
Right.
It just shows that 3 people were shot.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it shows. And so she's, or he, or whoever is going off of what they were told happened. One question I have, I can't remember because it's been so long since I watched it. On the recording of the dispatch, with the police officers when they're en route and arrive,
Mm-hmm.
is the word suicide mentioned?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think so, but it sounds like the one that we have, at least the one that I have, is chopped up. So I don't know if there's parts missing, or if somebody just took the main parts that made sense and created a video out of it. But that's a really good question. I don't remember any. The other thing that would be interesting to see is because if you look at the 911 call, Judy's already talking about that. She's already talking about a murder or a suicide. She's already talking about the where the gun is, but she's also talking about dog scavenging. And it's just like, you have it all right there. Well, there you go. Everything is wrapped up nicely, and so that you make a really great point. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to the dispatch audio.
And the other question I have, I don't know if there's audio of this because I don't know when they cut off, audio. But when they actually enter the home, do they clear the home?
Yes.
Because
I don't even
the
remember
thing
them
is,
talking
you know,
about the
if
smell.
you treat it like a homicide, you're supposed to act as though there may be someone still in the home.
Correct. Which
And
I
so you
which
go
I
in-
believe that they did. I actually believe that the
They
first
did.
the first responders, I do believe that they did their job. They did exactly what they should have
Okay.
done. That's just my view on it.
And it was
Okay.
super fast too. They go in and it's like really fast.
Well, first they have to get that dog out. That's the first thing.
Mhm.
So they have to wait for somebody to help them, and they once they lure that dog out and they get the dog out, then then they go in. So they obviously noticed that there wasn't a clear threat, like there wasn't somebody in the house who was like hovering over the bodies or holding anybody as a hostage or anything. So there were certain things that they did notice, but they those two officers, Officer Keeler and I'm trying to remember the second officer, it might have been Broughton. But yeah, I think they did a very good job of just going through it, clearing the house, making sure that there was nobody in there, and not touching anything, not moving anything. I don't believe that they moved anything. That they cleared that house and waited for investigators. I think that they did their job properly.
No reason. Well, and what I was leading up to is just try and figure out where the breakdown of grasping onto suicide may have started, because it sounds like initially then they treated it as a homicide because they went in and they cleared because there may have been a threat, so they made sure there wasn't a threat. So at what point after that did all of a sudden the suicide narrative come into play, the murder-suicide narrative?
Well, I don't know, Sophia. I want to get your view on this too, but I don't think that they ever treated this as a triple homicide. I think that it started with the 911 call, so you already had that. I think that the investigators treated this as suspicious deaths up until January 18th at 11:40 a.m. Then they were treating it as a double murder suicide. I think that's what the documents show.
Wow. That's
I
just
went
crazy.
back and looked at the initial search warrants, and even then, they don't say that they're treating it as a suicide, but they're
Oh.
really not even saying that it's a homicide either. Like that, they're just saying suspicious deaths, and that they're taking evidence from the house, but they really don't say that it clearly that it was either a suicide or triple murder. So, because I was trying to see if they went in there thinking, oh, this is just a suicide, a murder-suicide, and we're just going to investigate it that way. The
And I know.
search warrants
I'm sorry.
don't say that yet.
Right.
What wall is the orange, kind of yellow-orange wall again?
That's behind the recliner. I think that's the one that you're talking about. So that would be the living
And that's
room
where,
east wall.
okay, and that's where the medium velocity blood spatter is on the wall.
Right, which is weird because there's not any blood spatter on the recliner, which is in front of the wall, which isn't, so how does it get there and not get on, how does it get on the east wall of the living room but not on the recliner that's right there?
Mhm. That's in the further away it would get, the smaller the spatter would get. So, and there were no bodies found over there. So that's really strange. That blood spatter has really troubled me
Yeah, it seems like there's something missing.
for a long time.
Hmm.
It seems that's why I'm going with that there was some kind of altercation, struggle type thing that happened.
Yeah, I mean, in these 7 these 7 points here, none of them, talk about, hey, just make sure that you look up, and make sure that you look for any bullet holes that you might miss or anything like that. Um, but number 6 is another good one: the failure to properly document any suicide notes. Now, because before we knew the contents of the two quote unquote notes, the media, the family, everybody was out there saying that these were suicide notes, or they would insinuate, or they would just say they were two notes. Mason Hendricks is one of the only people that really said that these are two notes and they don't mean anything. Now later he might change his story after that, but he was quoted as saying that these two notes do not explain anything. And I think a lot of people who are just, they wake up, they read, okay, what's happening here, looking for some juicy news story, and we're just like, oh, okay, yeah, he left two notes. Well, if he leaves one, okay, that's one thing, but if there's two, then obviously, the guy's guilty and he's a soldier. And during that time, we were all kind of being told, at least here, that soldiers are crazy and they have PTSD, they're committing suicide, and they have all of these problems because of the war and blah blah blah. So I think a lot of people, at least in my area, kind of wrote that off and didn't really, look deeper into it. But it was the news responsibility, as a journalist, that's your responsibility to tell the truth and to not give your views on it. A journalist should never do that. They should report, this person said this person said that, and then you get into people's quotes and stuff. But we're living in this age now where it's all about clickbait. So that's why the news stories or the videos that were more about the government killed David, that's why they get more views, they get more clicks, they get more likes, they get more revenue, etc., etc., because it's a juicy entertainment story. It's only now that we're seeing, who the real researchers are, who the real people that really care about this case are 5 years later. Because now all that stuff is gone. Go ahead.
And I've done some research on suicide notes because I wanted to see statistically how many people leave suicide notes, how many don't. I even went into veterans and delved into age and all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of information out there about that kind of stuff if anyone wants to research it. But the thing is there is a high percentage of people that don't leave suicide notes. But the percentage of people that do leave suicide notes, the suicide notes are usually, I'm sorry, and they address family members, I love you, I'm sorry, that type of thing. That's usually what it is. If it's not that, it's usually someone that is committing suicide because they have some kind of issue and they're blaming another person. So they'll say, this is so-and-so's fault, or,
Right.
or they'll say, I just can't do this anymore, or whatever. I mean, if they leave a note, it's usually kind of explanatory and apologetic and sending last words to family members. And with what David's personality appeared to be like, it just doesn't seem like he would leave some kind of generic suicide note like what they're saying as the suicide note. It just doesn't.
Well, and
it doesn't mesh.
Who leaves two of them, right? And then if you count
Exactly.
the writing,
I haven't come across that. No.
and then if you count the writing on the living room wall, that's 3 notes in 3 separate rooms. Why would I not be looking
And how
for 3
cryptic
separate
is that?
Right. Right. Why would I just think that David Crowley did this? And if he did, okay, here's all you have to do. Handwriting comparisons, which they never did, right? I mean, these are simple things that they could have done to prove David Crowley was guilty. My fear, and I think a lot of people share this, is that the reason why they didn't do those tests is because it would show that he was not guilty. And at what point can we, get somebody who can do those tests and who can show that there's no way that he was guilty? And maybe that's where we are now, to help us get the case reopened. It's not about blaming. I don't blame the AVPD as a whole. I don't blame the investigators as a whole. But I do think that this case needs to be open to understand the investigation. The investigators need to be investigated.
For sure. I agree.
So I was looking at this movie, Soaked in Bleach, which is the whole, the Kurt Cobain thing. It's a great film too, and it was one of the films that I watched, and there's similar things here too. So I was just looking back into that, and it just goes back to the whole suicide notes. I mean, it's just, these aren't suicide notes, and Sidra Kamel's sister and I completely disagreed. She thought they were suicide notes, and I don't.
It's funny that you mentioned Soaked in Bleach, because I lived in Olympia, Washington when that happened, and I lived there when Nirvana was coming up, and I lived 2 blocks away from where Kurt Cobain lived, and I know other people that knew them even better, and that suicide note, he loved his daughter, but he just some of the things that are said in it, especially in reference to Courtney and stuff, it's not him. It's not him writing that, because that's not how he felt. I mean, based off of what he expressed to other people.
Right.
And she definitely, I mean, I'm not gonna cast any stones or anything like that, but yeah, that's been in question since it happened. I mean, especially around there, the consensus was he didn't do that. He wouldn't have done that because of his daughter.
Right.
And that kind of goes into play with the same thing. I mean, I really just don't see. I mean, you can see just in pictures and video his interaction with his daughter. David, I just don't see how he would be able to bring himself to do that. He loved her. They were so close. They were so close. He adored her.
I was watching a live stream with David in it, and he was just very fatherly with Rainey, and it was really interesting to see, because so many people, I mean, even with other people on the set, he was really on point with them and open and stuff, and it was nothing like how the documentary portrayed him. He was the exact opposite of that. He wasn't egotistical in that live stream that he had put on. He wasn't overbearing. He wasn't a hothead kind of person. It just seemed like they were all together. They were focusing on this scene that, it was the one where they were getting ready to, the night raid with all the
Mm-hmm.
kids and
Yep.
everything.
Yep.
That's the live stream that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that
and
was
she's
the
saying,
opener.
"Watch, Daddy," and he takes the time to stop and acknowledge her. He doesn't say, "Go away," I'm trying to work. He stops what he's doing and he acknowledges her. She's laughing and she's saying, "Watch, Daddy, watch," and it just seems. I mean, and if he were in any way abusive or anything, I don't think she would have that type of rapport with him. She was so excited. Watch, Daddy. It's just typical little girl with her daddy.
Well, I'm not
And
sure. I'm not sure if both of you are talking about the same video. Because the one that Sophia is talking about, I believe that's the one where actually Rania was in that scene, and she was one of the children that was being dragged out of the house, and they were told to scream. She was an actor, so I don't know if we're talking about the same.
yeah, we're talking about
Are you
different ones.
okay? Okay.
I'm talking about the clip that they showed
In
when
the
they were actually going to do that live
Oh,
stream.
okay. Oh, okay.
That's on the
Gotcha.
documentary. They're preparing for that live stream.
Oh, okay. I think I need to go back and watch the
It's in the
documentary.
documentary.
Yeah, I got to go back and watch
and
it.
yeah, because they're prepping for it, because it's right after he's like talking to all of the kids and stuff, and like what I was talking about before. But and he's talking to other people and everything, but she's jumping up and down, and they actually added that to the documentary, and that's the one thing in there that does contradict the picture that they're trying to paint of him. It's I mean, because a lot of parents, if they're working on something like that, they would be quite dismissive, with their kids. Hang on, wait a minute, I'm trying to do something, go over there. I'll talk to you in a minute, stop interrupting. But, I mean, even though he was doing something that was important, he paused and acknowledged her. And that kind of stuff, if you look at, like, human behavior and communication and stuff like that, that really says a lot about him.
Yep.
I really do encourage the audience to go and try to find any live streams that David did or any of his other work, like on the YouTube channel Hothead Productions, because you get a completely different picture of David. And just don't go with just a documentary where they pick and choose what you were spoon-fed. All this other stuff, you take that into account, the live streams, his other work, and then the research information that we have been discussing. You can find all the files in the group. I've been adding everything that wasn't there, and you'll easily see that David is not the person that people have said he was.
Yep, and I'm just looking at their channel now. I know we've talked about some of their stuff and some of their videos, and I know the Silence of Self movie, that's really, that's, I want to save that one for another day, I think, possibly, but,
But
mhm.
that movie right there could have given them the idea to sell David off as crazy.
Should I play the? It's a 4-minute clip. I could try to play this unless YouTube censors me. I don't know.
No, they'll censor the video afterwards.
You think so?
Don't risk it.
All right, we'll go to the Hothead Hothead Productions, and you'll see that. And in that video, in this video right here, you will see David. David's in it. David's brother is in it. Mitch Heil is also in it too. So it's a It's a very creative video, is what I would say, and 9 years ago. So I mean, um, he was definitely on to something. Um, so
They use they
yeah,
even use Allison in one of the videos. Is titled "The Bitch," and she's a newscaster.
yeah, I see that one here. For the for the bitch. Yes. Interesting. Very interesting stuff. Um, hmm. Well, let's see. Okay, so going back to number 7, the failure to take each factor to its ultimate conclusion. And this quote right here is the one that really stuck out to me. Remember, and every person in law enforcement, you know, there should be one thing added to this. Remember, do it right the first time. You only get one chance. And remember, just look up. Look up. Look for bullet holes. Look for bullet holes because they may be there. And with this case, what you have is the bullet holes that popped up 1 month later, and the investigators say that they have photos that show that the bullet hole was there in the house on January 17th when the bodies were found. Yet we really have to press them? Do we really have to get a lawyer or to get somebody to help us get one of those photos that show that there was a bullet hole in the living room ceiling on January 17th? It shouldn't be this hard. Are they trying to make it this difficult so people will just get, not bored, but because people have other things going on too? There's so many other cases. Are they just trying to just kind of wait us out and hope that people give up? Because I can tell you right now, that's not going to happen. Looking at how many members we have in the Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook group, that's not happening. It is growing. They are growing. Anything else on this? I think every law investigator, everybody should read this. And this was published. It looks like it was published in 2006. I think it was published earlier, but this guy, Vernon G. Gibberth, definitely somebody who might be able to help us. And it's just about, all of you know somebody who knows somebody who does this stuff. Reach out to them. Get their view on this. They might give you some tip. They might give you something that can help us. And for everybody out there who feels like, hey, I've given you guys this stuff. I've told you this. And they feel like we're not doing anything with it. Please be patient. Just be patient with us because, a lot of this stuff is new to me. So I got to catch up on this. I got to understand what I'm looking at here. And, there are many patient people. And so I'm very thankful for everybody who is looking into this case and who has taken some time to try to help us and to give us tips. And I know we have people out there that are frustrated that they have worked hard on this case and they don't see progress. But, progress is measured in very different ways. Don't measure the progress of this case on an entertainment value. Don't measure the progress of this case based on if it's on a TV show or based on how many people know about it or how famous this case is. Base the progress on the documents and what we are doing to help get the case reopened. Let's stay focused there because that's where the real focus is.
I agree. Thank you.
Any final words?
Oh, they were talking about what what rapture is and stuff.
Oh,
I
okay.
guess
So let's go
the
to the
rapture
comments.
thing.
Okay.
And I put in a definition. This was just one of quite a few that came up. And unfortunately, because we have like a character limit, I could only put just a little bit in there. So, definition of rapture: an expression or manifestation of ecstasy and passion, a state of experience of being carried away or overwhelming emotion. And there's others too, but
Sure.
there's lots of different meanings for what it is. It's not just one.
Well, I mean, to a Christian, right? It's gonna mean something totally different. So when they're talking about being raptured, that was a big thing that stuck out to me. It's like, wait a minute, you guys are Christians. What are you talking about? You can't be raptured, but you're still here. So it was almost like they were kind of like, at least from my view, it's like they weren't serious talking about a rapture. They were, they were documenting whatever they were going through and whatever Kamel said.
A mystical experience here, a mystical experience in which the spirit is exalted to a knowledge of divine things. I don't know, that kind of seems to fit what Kamel was trying to explain.
This was one of the parts that I took out of my book, and I might put this back in there, but it was the spiritual part that I took out of my book. Because I I don't understand where they're coming from, where they're talking about this stuff, where they're talking about the rapture. Are they talking about the same rapture that we're talking about, that as Christians, what the rapture is? So
And it
I don't
doesn't
know.
help that we don't have the entire recording either. We only have a bit of it. So it's taken out of context.
Right.
I mean, also, I mean, this is just a thought I have, is because she also talks about looking for him for a long time, and not being able to find him, and not being able to find Rania and stuff like that. And I wonder, because she converted to Christianity, from being, a Muslim, could she have been possibly conflicted, like afraid, like of being disconnected from them in the afterlife if she made the wrong decision? You know what I mean? Kind of like salvation is kind of like what I'm referring to, and I'm not stating any of my personal beliefs, but what I'm saying is, I just wonder if maybe she's kind of going through, okay, what if this is right, and what if this is wrong, or what if this is wrong, and what if this is right, and because he believed one thing and she had converted, but could she have been having some kind of crisis of faith and being afraid of not being with them?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when I listen to what she's saying, to the transcripts of what she's saying and talking about the rapture and all this, to me it has nothing to do with Christianity. They're
No,
yeah.
the existentialism and
Yeah, they're saying, okay, we're Christians, but we're also going to look outside of Christianity. And I think that's where the big problem came. I think they might have let some things in, and might have been looking into things that they, as Christians, you should not be looking into because you're more vulnerable. And really, if you've already converted into Christianity too, it's like, but at the same time, I've been trying to understand how Kamel and her family, how they were raised. If they were raised on a military base, and a U.S. military base in Saudi Arabia, that could be a strong Christian base there, possibly, you know, because you're in the enemy zone, you're in the territory there that is like, whoa, how are we going to be Christians here? And especially if you're from Pakistan, and there's so much that goes into that I guess we could sit here and speculate. The thing that I know is that God knows for sure. And so,
Yeah.
I never want to say that somebody who claims that they are a Christian isn't. And, I never want to, put them in that spot. Well, because you didn't do this, then you're not a Christian. I never want to go there, because that's their journey between them and God. I don't want to stand in between that. So, this has been challenging. It's been a very challenging case when it comes to the spiritual stuff here, because I have very strong views, and I do think that there are strong indications here of some paranormal stuff, and that's hard to talk about, and a lot of people don't want to talk about. I mean, I would think that, if you wanted to make people look crazy, you would accuse them of that instead of accusing them of being a part of the government killed him. You would say, oh, well, there were demons or something like that. You know what I mean? But as a Christian, the demonic aspect is something that I take seriously. Doesn't mean that it's true, but I take it seriously.
But that's one reason why I think that she may have been conflicted, because she even says, I don't know, am I going crazy?
Right, because of her scientific mind.
And
yeah,
so
her scientific mind.
So it's like her rational mind, but I mean, she may have just had way too many different belief systems going, at one time, and was kind of meshing them together, and then she did actually kind of feel like she was going crazy because she was having different thoughts about things. It seems she was definitely in some kind of crisis of faith. It seems to me like, I mean, even if she was a Christian, like you said, if she was a Christian and she was dabbling in something else, if both of them were dabbling in something else, I mean, that's just great ammunition for getting attacked. And I mean, I know everyone may not believe the same thing, but I mean, my personal beliefs, I'm a Christian, and I do believe, in attack, and so I mean, it's just a perfect feeding ground for something like that. I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way to put it. Any final thoughts
she
here?
Very well
Anything
could have
here?
been seeing that stuff.
I think she was. I mean, because it wasn't like she was just hearing something; she felt something.
Yeah.
And then we have her sister, and her sister's footage about this was taken out of Eric Nelson's sloppumentary. It might not have been a sloppumentary if they would have kept Kamel's family side in this, because to me, that's where the paranormal stuff is. That's where all of that comes from, where you have, a clear case where Kamel's sister is saying, man, there was something there. There was something in that house, not in the Crowley house where they died, in a place that they lived before that. And she had said that up until that point, she did not believe in demons, ghosts, anything like that. But after she saw it for herself, she did. And I was really frustrated that that part of the sloppumentary was taken out, because see,
Yeah.
they wanted to
Go ahead.
keep
I'm
that
sorry.
in. No, please, I want to get your comments on this too, but they wanted to keep that in because I think that Eric Nelson, and I'm just guessing, I don't know what his motives are or anything, but I think that the reason they wanted to keep that in was to make Kamel look crazy. They were going to use that type of stuff to make her look crazy, when to me it makes her look credible, and it makes everything that happened, it makes sense from a spiritual point. Okay, we're not talking about, just a regular thing. We're talking about the supernatural. We're talking about the paranormal here. And I think a lot of people in the alternative media and a lot of people in the truth, quote unquote, movement, they don't want to go there because they know it's going to turn people off, and they know it's going to hurt them. It's going to hurt their business. And that's
Well,
a
I know
problem.
it's going to drive you crazy, but that's why I think you actually should keep that aspect in your book. I know you finished it, but I mean, I think that it's important that it be in your book so there can be a different perspective on it. Because, I mean, for anyone that hasn't, like, heard more about, like, what happened, I mean, like, when Sidra was visiting, and, and Rainey woke up and was screaming and stuff, and then she got up and she said that she walked into David and Kamel's room, and David was on his knees praying.
Correct. Praying
And
to
so,
Jesus.
I mean,
yeah.
so it shows
Yeah.
that there's something going on with him, not just her, that there was something going on with him as well.
Right.
And that's really been grazed over.
Right. So when you take that into the proper context of what you see in the sloppumentary, it's totally different, because now it isn't, oh, Kamel, is crazy. Now it's, wait a minute. There's a real paranormal activity happening here. There's a possibility that there's a real paranormal thing happening here, because now, you have Kamel, and people that listen to that, listen to her. She's not crazy. She's not crazy when she's repeating what happened. I don't believe that she's crazy there. And no, you're not going to convince me of that ever.
Well, and there are people that may not have been directly associated with them, but kind of close to them, that were into Satanism.
Oh yeah.
So it's really interesting that all of this kind of stuff was going on, and then such dark, horrible deaths. And if you look at like holidays and stuff on the satanic calendar, and I mean, I think there could have been more than one thing in play, but it's really scary. I mean, if you really start looking at it, if you open your mind up, even if you don't believe in that kind of stuff, because I mean, you don't necessarily have to believe in it to believe that other people believe in it, and that they may act based upon their belief systems. And I mean, if you really start looking at it and looking at different players and stuff like that, it becomes like very, very interesting.
That's right. That's right. And I just want to see if anybody here has any final words here before we shut this down here. I think we've gone about 2 hours 45 minutes. So, hey, we've been doing really, really good. Um, if anybody, Sophia, do you have any final words? I know you're working on a lot. I know you're researching a lot. Anything you want to say here to maybe even, I know we're going to come back here maybe in another week or so and do another conference call. Anything you want to say here right now before we shut this thing down?
No, nothing right now that I can really share. I mean, just, you're right, I am working on quite a bit of stuff, but that will come out in future videos. And but
Oh, and your thing on graphology was amazing.
thank you so
I mean,
much.
Thank you for working so hard on that. I know how hard you've been working, and it's amazing.
I appreciate it. I'm also trying to work on David's right now, his handwriting, and it's taking a while, but I'm hoping it'll have a different, because I won't be comparing and contrasting this time, so it'll be easier for the slideshow and everything.
That's great.
When will your book be ready for us to get?
I'm hoping, I really want to shoot for November late. You know, because I've only given it to maybe one or two people, and I want to, I'm working on the formatting. The biggest problem is making sure that the photos that the actual formatting of the book, the page numbers, the photos don't, there's not like huge blank spaces. That's what I'm working on now. So I would say, I can't see. I would love, and depending on the actual artwork, because I have my guy who's working on that now. So I'm hoping late November. At the very latest, obviously January 17th, but I don't imagine that I'm going to wait for that long. And this will be free. The PDF, anybody who wants to get a PDF, this will be free. And I also want to encourage people, because I know that I have friends who have their own websites and have their own things out there. Take this. You can take this PDF and host it onto your website. I want people to feel free to do whatever they want with this PDF once it's out there. So I am hoping by the end of next month, by the end of November, if not sooner. I was able to get this done a lot sooner, but again, I'm only, I really haven't hired anybody to do the proofreading or anything like that, so I'm constantly right now going in the phase of just going back over and over, make sure there's no typos, grammar errors, things like that. And now that you've, talked about the spiritual chapter, I'm going to go and I'm going to make sure
Sorry.
that I edit that, and I might include that into the research section of this book.
Well, there's lots of definitions covering what rapture means. It's not just the one definition, so I hope that you'll include
and
to it.
and that was kind of the whole thing, is because I don't want the book to be my interpretation of what happened. I really want this to be a place where researchers can go for their research, not to think that this book is going to solve the whole case or anything like that. But I would definitely say, if David and his wife were Christians and they're coming from a Christian view, that's kind of why it's almost like, well, should I even include what rapture means, or should I just let everybody interpret whatever they want to think rapture means? Because my view of rapture could be different from David's. I know many Christians, me and my friend Walter Bradley, we talk about rapture and all of this, and we're two, strong believers in Jesus Christ, and we probably have different views on what the rapture really is, on what it's going to be like.
Oh yeah,
You know
that's
what
a
I mean?
huge thing. I mean, and if people in Christian communities, I mean, there's even different views on, like, if they believe that the rapture is the same thing, they believe rapture will take place at different times within certain time frames of different things occurring. So, I mean, even within the Christian community, rapture's different. But I think that you including that, like, just throwing it out there, rapture, because I mean, it was put in the documentary that they had gotten into existentialism and stuff like that.
That's
So,
true. That's true.
since it was put in the documentary, I think that it would be relevant for you to just include it, because it kind of gives people a point of reference,
Yeah, you're right.
and then they can draw their own conclusions.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the things, because I know we've had, I think Donna, maybe, I think it was Donna, somebody had actually transcribed some of that stuff. Uh, so yeah, I think as long as it's, as long as I can put it in there where it's not my interpretation of it, but if I can, get the quotes and things like that out there, yeah, I think I might include that in there. So it's all your fault.
I'm sorry. Don't send me an ugly message later.
Why would you? Yeah, the paranormal stuff is all Christy's fault.
How
Yeah,
could you do that?
blame it on Christy, pretty much. But no, no, it is relevant. I mean, it really is, and I know there are people, that don't want to talk about that stuff, and that's fine. If you don't, and I don't care if people, think that because we're talking about it, that we're not credible. Obviously, I don't care anything about my credibility or anything like that. I want to give people as much information as possible. So I think that you're right. It's somewhere in that book. What is said, what happened, it should be documented. That's it.
Yeah, and because it's really interesting too, because spirituality also comes into play with, like, the direction that David may have been planning on taking
Correct.
a gray state. You
Correct.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there really is a lot to do with the spirituality aspect of it, because I think that I think one thing, people do kind of avoid going in that direction, because unfortunately they don't want to put people off or lose an audience, so to speak. But I think the fact that he actually said on, I can't remember who it was. Was it Jason that shared that podcast that he had done? Or no, not Jason. Who was it? I can't remember who it was, but it was the podcast that he did, and he was talking about it, and they asked him if he was any relation to Aleister Crowley,
Right.
and he kind of just sat there. But then he actually himself alluded to the fact that he may actually take it in a more spiritual direction.
Correct.
So, I mean, all of that could have a lot of bearing on things
Yep. It
if
could.
other people didn't want him going that direction.
That's right. All right. I'm going to shut this down here. I want to thank everybody for joining us.
Okay.
Everybody in the chat. I know there were a lot of chats that we did not get to, a lot of things that we did not get to, but I want to make sure that we come back here and we will have some updates here in the very near future, and we'll just make sure that we keep this case going. So I want to thank everybody here, and God bless you all.
You too. Have a good night, everybody.
You too.
All right, and until we meet again,
All right.
thank you all for joining us here on the Gray Stage, the YouTube channel. This is where we're going to have all of our newest live stream feeds. Had some issues with my other channel, and I'm going to work all of that stuff out. But I do want to make this channel, it is dedicated to this case. We're going to think about creating a podcast that is for this case. I don't know if it's going to be a weekly, at least a monthly podcast, but it will be dedicated to this case, and I want to make sure that we keep this case going until we are able to get a real investigation, until we're able to get somebody who can actually get the case reopened. If any of you know anybody, please talk to people. Just tell them about this case. Make it a casual conversation. You don't have to tell them everything about this case. You pick their brains. Pick people's brains about this case. Ask them, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about a case where the police walk into a house, they leave the crime scene, and they do not see a bullet hole above their head? Every officer, every person in law enforcement that I have talked to has a problem with that. For whatever reason, the Apple Valley Police Department do not have a problem with that. You can have detectives involved in this case that will say that, hey, I saw the bullet hole. I saw it, but I don't know when. You don't know when you saw a bullet hole above your head? You were inside of this house during an investigation, and you don't know when you saw this bullet hole? Are you kidding me? No. So things like that, simple things like that, just bring it up. Again, it's not about attacking the investigators. It's just about making sure that a proper investigation is done in this case. And that's where we are today. So I want to thank everybody. Thank you for joining us here. And we are out. Today is October 4th, 2019. I want to thank you all, and we will be back here within another week or so. God bless you all. Keep marching. Truth is marching on.